positive reaction from last weekend, Nigel, from the players?
Well, positive in terms of how they responded. Yes, it's been hard because these things they live with you for days and weeks, particularly when they're based on games that we should have won. Really, it was there for us to win. We didn't take our opportunities, and it's all the more difficult to deal with then. Hugely frustrating for everybody.
This weekend, the up there is one of the biggest you've had over the last 2 or 3 years.
Oh, I think so, without a shadow of a doubt. The fact that we've put ourselves in this position is massive, but it won't count for anything unless we can put a performance and a result in on Saturday.
After that London Irish win, Nigel, you must look at the side you had then compared to what's happened since. With key players, with obviously David, Matthew Rees, Mark Jones to name but a few. How are you going to sort of overcome that this week? Because ideally you'd want to be going into a game against the European champions with your full strength side.
Yeah, I think it was always going to be the case where we have to deal with injuries. It's something that all teams are facing, particularly in the modern day. And what we've tried to do is give as many of our younger players opportunities for these eventualities. I think we've got some real quality coming in to fill those spots. But what it does mean is, the further down the line you look, then the less quality you've got. I think the luxury that we had probably going into the first series of Heineken games was the players that we could bring on to impact the game. So we're starting to diminish that quality. But I'm comfortable with the boys that are going to come in. It's a great opportunity for them, and I'm sure they're going to do us all proud on Saturday.
What about Leinster and Nigel, European champions? They haven't played together for a while though. That could be because obviously they didn't play last week. They put a second team out of the Dragons. Is that something you could perhaps?
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting. I think both sides took a slightly different approach to the last weekend. The advantage we've had is that we've had a performance, not the result that we'd have wanted, but it's allowed us to look at certain aspects of our game which weren't quite right. It was a quick turnaround as well because a lot of the international boys came back. They only really trained with us on a Thursday. I just felt that we needed to have some time on the park together to see where we were. We've been able to do that, and as a result, I'd like to think we built some things into our game for this Saturday. The other way of looking at it is that it was a tough autumn series for all the boys who played international rugby, and to give them a week off to freshen them off is also a way that people can look at things. Leinster have been developing as a team for a lot longer than we have, and they have probably got a lot more in place in terms of their game, so they're probably a little bit more confident in resting their players possibly.
You mentioned on the weekend, Nigel, that midfield battle. Obviously with Driscoll and Darcy coming in there, and what is very much a new combination with yourselves. How do you see that? Yeah,
I think I'm certainly looking forward to that, and I'm sure most people who are going to watch the game will be excited by that. It's going to be very interesting. 4 quality players on show, international players, and up against each other, and it could be one of the areas where the game is won and lost, to be honest.
Have you been pleased with the way that's developed at 12-13? Obviously Sean has played much there.
Yeah, I think I've been very pleased with the way that it's worked for us. Sean has fitted into that 13 role extremely well and comfortably. And again, that's why I wanted to run them out last weekend, for them to get a bit more game time together. It wasn't ideal, it wasn't perfect, but the fact that they've had another game under their belts together will help them grow.
Is it nice, Nigel, the fact that there's a big spotlight on the Scarlets this weekend, this live on Sky, whereas the first 2 games you sort of, not, I suppose ignored is the wrong way, but the wrong word, but you weren't really seen as almost challenges in the tournament.
Yeah, it's great in one regard because we've performed well enough to give ourselves this opportunity, but what we've got to make sure is that we back it up now, and that's the challenge for us. People may say that maybe sides took us lightly in those first couple of games. I'm sure Leinster won't be taking us lightly, and we'll see just how far we've come against arguably one of the top teams in Europe.
Strong words from Michael Checker yesterday, talking about this being their the must-win game for them, and it's come to the stage of the tournament where defeat, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, it is. It's a huge game for both sides. There's no doubt about that, and it will probably define really what happens in this group. it's that important, really. You know, and from our point of view, we're delighted that we've been able to put ourselves in this position. But it won't count for anything unless we can back it up.
And you've got obviously still a lot of young players in the side, and there's no danger of it's a new to them this big occasion, no danger of them freezing or anything like that.
I don't think they'll freeze. No, we've still got enough experience around them. I think they have grown as players over the last 12 months or so. But this is a great challenge for them. You know, this is why they play rugby, and I think they all realise it now. There's a difference between wanting to be a professional rugby player and being a professional rugby player, and the first couple of years of a young player's career is all about understanding that, and the reality is a lot more difficult to come to terms with than the dream, and there's a lot of pressure on these players to perform. We'll be putting a lot of pressure on these players to perform. There's expectations on them, and they realise that now. You know, it's not just about going out there and throwing the ball about and making up the numbers and maybe hiding behind the fact that they're young players. It's not about that anymore. You know, we've got to front up.
Important though is the role of someone like Stephen Jones, Lamont, the Lions, and this sort of occasion, because they've been here before.
Yeah, it's absolutely vital. You know, you just couldn't do it without that amount of experience in the team, and we've got it. You know, I'm comfortable we've got it, and I just pulled Steve up earlier because he spoke at the end of the session, and I thought he spoke exceptionally well. And what people like Steve sometimes don't realise is the impact that they have on the younger group. And you know, he made some really relevant points. And to have a senior player who can, you know, do that from a coaching point of view is absolutely invaluable. You know, you can't buy that type of inspiration that Steve put across to this group earlier today.